Australian Special Forces unlawfully killed 39... Okay, let me check. Did Mr. Geek send me the thing I need to do to fix it? No, he did not. Okay. Unlawfully killed 39 in Afghanistan. New report finds. This is from NPR. So we're going to read NPR first, then The Guardian, then we're going to watch a short docu. Members of the Australian Special Forces allegedly killed 39 people during operations in Afghanistan in violation of international law, according to a long-awaited report. Now, let me be clear before we go forward on there. These 37 civilians and non-combatants that were killed, they were killed within a 4-year time span. They weren't killed all within like the whole entirety of the war. Like, this is all the civilians. This is within 4 years, and these are execution style killings. This isn't like we bombed a bunch of terrorists and a civilian was caught in a crossfire. That's not what we're talking about here. Trump, Biden, oh boy. I actually wanted to talk about the Trump firings. But yeah, there's so much we need to talk about in relation to foreign policy. So we're going to do Australia first. Then we're going to try to cover all these firings that Trump's doing, which I have so much information on that it's hard to read it all. I'll actually have to Google it. I lost all my tabs the other day, so I don't have the articles I wanted to read anymore. But I will read them, and I'll tell you about them. Okay. Results of the inquiry, which is the culmination of 4 years of work, were released by the country's military chief, Angus Campbell. It found credible evidence of instances at various points from 2009 to 2013 of serious unlawful actions by members of the Australian Defence Force. It also detailed other instances of war crimes committed by soldiers. So, the Australian Defence Force specifically, and war crimes committed by soldiers generally. Got it. The findings showcase a disgraceful and profound portrayal of Australian Defence Force's professional standards and expectations, Campbell said, according to the Sydney Morning Herald. The report, containing large sections that are redacted, found that 25 current or former Australian defence personnel were involved in the killing of 39 Afghan nationals or non-combatants considered captured. That means people who were tied up, people who have been arrested, and were then killed, or injured and no longer a threat. That's somebody with their leg blown off or something like that, and they go up, boom, shoot them in the head. And I saw one of the videos in question. They are absolutely brutal. It was somebody's on the ground, hands up, comes off, yells he's going to shoot him, and then just shoots him. It was like completely unprompted. The person did not have a gun, did not have a firearm, and the person with him didn't even like scold him for doing it. It was almost like just a kind of like it almost seemed like the dude just felt awkward that he was in the situation. Further, the investigation found credible evidence that members of the Special Forces group engaged in the cruel treatment of prisoners on at least 2 occasions, also in the violation of international law and considered a war crime. None of these incidents of disputable decisions made under pressure in the heat of the battle. Okay, so what they're saying is that none of the incidents or decisions in question, it was like, oh god, bullets flying everywhere, gotta shoot the civilian. Oh no, I thought that was like a bad. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about these are people in a location where they can make sound decisions, and they still make the sound decision to kill captured civilians, non-combatants, injured people who are no longer a threat, and engage in cruel treatment of prisoners, which is considered a war crime. Yeah, the video with the dog, that's the one I'm talking about too. Yeah. It relied on interviews of more than 400 soldiers, officers, Afghan villagers, and others. So that's pretty deep report. The damning report released in Australia may lead to the criminal prosecution of those so far unnamed soldiers involved. It recommended that Campbell refer 36 instances to the Australian Federal Police for criminal investigation involving a total of 19 individuals. So it's not even including all the individuals involved, but I think they're trying to go after the cases that are the most likely to possibly get convictions or get actions done upon it. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said last week that a special investigator would be appointed to consider next steps and possible prosecutions, according to the BBC. Campbell emphasized cultural issues within the military were to blame for the allegations, he said in a speech ahead of the report's release. A misplaced focus on a distorted culture focusing on prestige, status, and power are to blame, Campbell said. A misplaced focus on a culture that focuses on prestige, status, and power. I guess he's talking about how humane treatment and stuff of that sort was not as much emphasized. It was more power, strength, war type culture. Well, of course, you need a certain amount of that, but if that's the only thing you focus on, then human rights and protecting civilians ain't going to be a huge priority. This was embraced and amplified by some experienced, charismatic, and influential non-commissioned officers and their proteges, who fused military excellence with ego, entitlement, and exceptionalism. Okay, so yeah, it's that hardcore bro dude, like we're coming here to like fight the savages type mentality. You capitalist scum, congrats. Thank you so much, Redneck. I really appreciate it. Remember 3 months ago when everyone's saying the military is more disciplined in use of force than the police? It's hard to say, actually. I wonder if... I can't say. I mean, obviously, to say that like the military doesn't commit war crimes would be a ridiculous thing to say. But I then again, I mean, it's like saying, like... It's like asking, like... It's hard discipline, because I know that there have been military officers and military soldiers who will go into the police force after they're done with service, and they cannot use de-escalation tactics they learned in war zones to de-escalate situations with civilians, and will get actually lambasted afterwards for doing so. So it's hard for me to really comment, and I'm not an expert on policing, so I'd also not like to really go deep into that. Anyway, back to this. Charges are being implemented to prevent that from continuing, he said. The Special Air Servants Regiment 2nd Squadron, which was associated with several instances of wrongdoing mentioned in the report, will be struck off the Army's order of battle, reformed and renamed the Herald Report. Okay, so the Special Service Regiment 2nd Squadron. So here is, you're asking for specifics of which specific, like, squadron did it. This is one of the examples. The Special Air Service Regiment 2nd Squadron. And not only are they going to do investigations into it, they're off the order of battle, they're going to be top-down reformed. I don't know if it doesn't look like they're going to get rid of it. They're going to reform and rename it to try to completely do a new start on the whole squadron. Some members of the Special Operations Task Group, which was responsible for some of the unlawful actions, took active steps to conceal their crimes, the report indicated. Makes sense? They placed weapons such as easily concealable pistols, handheld radios, weapon magazines, or grenades on the bodies of those killed. They took photos of the bodies to frame the victims as legitimate targets. Okay, so this is something you'll see like all the time, like in like movies or media, and this is something that does happen in the United States as well. Planting evidence on people you arrest or beat the fuck out of, whether it be like crack cocaine or like a gun or a knife. This is something that has happened before domestically, but this is something that also obviously happens in war, where you'll kill a civilian, and in these reports they're talking about people who are either captured and they execute, people who are injured and no longer a threat, people that they treat extremely cruelly and has been designated to be a war crime. All these instances, what they'll do afterwards, once the person's dead, in this instance we're talking about between 2009 to 2013, where over 39 civilians and non-combatants were murdered, which is the correct word to use here. What they'll do is, like, after the fact, they'll look at this person they just executed and be like, well, damn, well, he has a radio. And they'll take, like, his radio out of his pocket, like, throw it at him. Well, here's a grenade from the stuff we captured earlier. We'll put a grenade on him. Here's a pistol. Click. Killed a terrorist. I'm a hero. Great for them. Wonderful. But those tactics are safer than most civilian. Yes, a lot of them are safer than most civilian, from what I've read. Again, I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to comment further, Redneck, on that specifically, but from what I've heard. When we were being trained in situational awareness and how to de-escalate, there are those that have force involved and those that don't. The ones that don't usually are bribe-based and promise-based. Since both parties involved will never have a trust factor, the benefit of de-escalation will be in the form of, okay, I don't trust you, nor do you trust me, so let's negotiate with what we want out of this, with the threat of death at all times. Which makes sense. Like, yo, I know you don't like me, I know you don't. Yeah, I see exactly how that could work in both military use and civilian use. Yo, we're both here. We're both armed. Neither of us want to come out of here dead. Since neither of us want to die, let's talk about how we can bring the situation down. Like, I can see how that can be useful in a lot of areas. Anyway, back to the thing. The investigation found that junior soldiers were also required by their patrol commanders to shoot a prisoner in order to achieve the soldier's first kill, in a practice known as blooding. It's just murder. They capture somebody who's unarmed, not a threat to anybody, and in order to just desensitize these soldiers, turn them into brutal murder machines, they're like, execute this person so you got some blood on you. You've taken a human life. And these people are supposed to be over there to protect us from terror and to help stabilize the country. See, this is the problem, and I talk about this all the time, and it just doesn't get through the brains of so many people. How the hell are we going to stabilize a country when our money is going to corrupt warlords? 40% of it's going to corrupt warlords. Our policies to deal with the drug problem in Afghanistan has been nothing but a complete failure, and we've got soldier-civilian conduct like this, and we're supposed to have our buddies like Australia and the rest of our people in the coalition there to help check us. Make sure that it's multi-states working here, multilateral. Even if we all know the multilateralism is the best way to deal with these types of situations, even with that, we're still bumping into this. While it would have been much easier to report that it was poor command and leadership that was primarily to blame for the events disclosed in this report, that'd be a gross distortion, the report said. But for a small number of patrol commanders and their proteges, it would not have been thought of, it would not have begun, it would not have continued, and it would not have been discovered. It is overwhelmingly at that level that responsibility resides. This is not the first time allegations of war crimes during the conflict in Afghanistan have arisen. In March, the International Criminal Court gave the okay to investigate into war crimes that had been committed by U.S. soldiers and others in war. By the way, when the ICC they said they wanted to investigate our soldiers, Mike Pompeo tried to strike hard on the ICC just for asking questions about our conduct in Afghanistan. The Australian Special Forces involved in the murder of 39 Afghan civilians, war crimes of report alleges. Ooh, here's a short video on it. Well, that's not working. There we go. Let me see if there's any video. No, there isn't. Okay, cool. Can you imagine? You go into Afghanistan. You are someone who's just arrived in the country. See you later, Redneck. You just arrived in the country. And you are going in there. You don't know the culture of the conflict. You don't know a lot about the conflict. You've just deployed. You're green as all hell. And one of the first things your commanders tell you to do is they bring out a captured man and they tell you to murder him. And you follow orders because you do what you're told. What type of culture is being drilled into your head? How do you think you're going to treat the rest of the Afghanis that you interact with? How do you think you're going to conduct yourself going forward in this conflict? Probably not with the pinnacle of human conditions and human rights in mind. Because the first thing you do, one of the first things you do when you get there, is commit a war crime. Absolutely horrific. None of them happened in the heat of the battle. The NPR report specifically said that it was in areas where they could think clearly, they could make clear decisions, and they murdered them. So it wasn't oopsie daisy, just executed someone. Not to mention, they purposely tried to cover it up and would throw guns and people and stuff on them afterwards. So not only did they commit the crime, not only did they do it with a clear state of mind, not only did they do it outside of the state of battle, not only was many of these people captured not civilians and not combatants, but then they tried to cover it up afterwards. 25 alleged perpetrators. I believe it was 19 that they're going to go harder into an investigation with. Like, trying to see if they can get criminal prosecution. Some are still serving in the ADF. And think, this report was talking about actions committed between 2009 and 2013. That means if we're talking some people who were serving within 2009 and they're still serving today, that is at minimum, if we go from 2009, 11 years. And if they, for whatever reason, it was at the end of 2013, at least 7 years. So 11 to 7 years being like the range, we're going to be like talking about the people who are still currently serving. And think of all the stuff they did after 2013. Think of all the stuff they've done in the last 7 years that are not even within this report. The type of culture they've fostered in the Australian military.
The report finds that some Special Air Service Regiment commanders in Australia fostered within the SAS what Justice Brereton terms a self-centred warrior culture. A misplaced focus on prestige, status and power, turning away from the regiment's heritage of military excellence fused with the quiet humility of service. The report notes that distorted culture was embraced and amplified by some experienced, charismatic and influential non-commissioned officers and their protégés, who sought to fuse military excellence with ego, elitism and entitlement. As units became consumed with preparing for and fighting the war, much of the good order and discipline of military life fell away. Cutting corners, ignoring and bending rules was normalised. What also emerged was a toxic competitiveness between the Special Air Service Regiment and the 2nd Commando Regiment, destructive of trust, cohesion and mission, and a disgrace to both. Not correcting this culture as it developed was a failure of unit and higher command.
Let's read this article, and then after the article, we're going to watch a small documentary on more of the information about what's going on down there. Australian Special Forces were allegedly involved in the murder of 39 Afghan civilians, in some cases executing prisoners to blood junior special forces by inventing cover stories and planting weapons on the corpses. For more than 4 years, the Major General Justin Paul Brereton had investigated allegations that a small group within the elite Special Air Services and Commandos Regiment killed and brutalized Afghan civilians, and in some cases, allegedly slitting throats, gloating about their actions, keeping kill counts, and photographing bodies with planted phones and weapons to justify their actions. It's like a fucking video game to them with human lives. The finding of the report, released on Thursday, are confronting and damning. Brereton describes the Special Forces action as disgraceful and a profound betrayal of the Defense Force. The report found Special Forces were responsible for dozens of unlawful killings, the vast majority of which involved prisoners. People who are captured, people who are not a threat to them, people who are within their custody. And that they are mandated to treat with respect and humanely. And this murder was deliberately covered up. 39 Afghans, 39, were unlawfully killed in 23 incidents, either by the Special Forces or at the instruction of the Special Forces. None of the killings took place in a heated battle. Again, one more time. Not a single one of these 39 murders happened in the heat of battle. So I've already said this a few times. So there's no way that any of them thought maybe this is a combatant, maybe they got a gun, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe it's this situation and I'm just miscalculating and I need to boom, boom, boom. No. These were mostly prisoners, some injured combatants who were no longer a threat, where they were in a position where they could evaluate the situation clearly, and they made the decision to murder, commit war crimes, and then cover it up and plant evidence on them. They all occurred in circumstances which, if accepted by a jury, would constitute the war crime of murder. All the victims... I don't want to see, like, kill 39 civilians. I want to see murder 39 civilians. We need to say straight off the bat what it is from now, like every single article headline. All the victims were either non-combatants or were no longer combatants. All of them. A total of 25 perpetrators have been identified either as principals or accessories. Some are still serving in the ADF, and they're still perpetuating that horrific culture. In all cases, the report finds, it was or should have been plain that the person killed was a non-combatant. The vast majority of victims had been captured and were under control, giving them the protection under international law. Patricia Gossman, senior researcher in Afghanistan for Human Rights Watch, urged nations whose military have served as part of the U.S. coalition in Afghanistan, including American and British, to follow Australia's example and probe their own soldiers' conduct. So, sadly, very sadly, this is not going to happen. This is not going to happen. Did they ever specify the mission? It wasn't one mission. It was a lot of missions. It was a lot of different examples. Some of it was them bringing people who have been captured to people who have just arrived in Afghanistan and ordering them to murder these prisoners to engage in this process called blooding, which was to basically like desensitize them to killing people in Afghanistan. Now, to completely desensitize them to that act. So by making them murder people, which is horrifically disgusting. Horrifically disgusting. But again, this is not going to happen. This investigation. The best example I can give you of how this is not going to happen is when the International Criminal Court earlier this year in like February or March tried to do an investigation into America's conduct in Afghanistan. Mike Pompeo rained hell upon them, tried to do sanctions, all this stuff, to just put pressure on the international court not to look into our actions. Because it's probably a good idea, we have a decent idea that what they're going to find isn't a pretty picture of 18 years of perfect conduct in Afghanistan. It was part of a sick culture that was essentially treated Afghans living in these contested areas as if they were dangerous criminals, even the children, or simply as not human. Some of the incidents described in the report are deeply troubling. Evidence suggests junior soldiers were instructed by their superiors to execute prisoners in cold blood as part of the blooding process. Typically, the patrol commander would take a person under control and the junior member and would then be directed to kill the person under control, the report found. Throwdowns would be placed with the body, and a cover story was created for the purpose of operational reporting and to deflect scrutiny. Throwdowns being, I believe, like a gun or a grenade or a phone or radio. The chief of the ADF, General Angus Campbell, promised to act on the Brereton Report's shameful, deeply disturbing, and appalling finding about the conduct of the Australian Special Forces. Campbell said he accepted all 143 recommendations, including referring individuals to the Office of Special Investigator to consider potential criminal cases because it is his duty to set things right. He has foreshadowed changes to the Army's organizational structure and review into the honors and awards. In the meantime, his unit citation award to the Special Operations Task Group's rotation serving in Afghanistan between 2007 and 2013 will be revoked. To the people of Afghanistan, on behalf of the Australian Defence Force, I sincerely and unreservedly apologize for any wrongdoing committed by the Australian soldiers. Well, I'm sure they appreciate the apology. Gotta balance the dark with the light to an extent, yeah. And to the people of Australia, I am sincerely sorry for any wrongdoing by the members of the Australian Defence Force. He added, adding that the majority of Special Forces did not choose to take this unlawful path. The Brereton Report, to a large degree, absolved senior command of having any knowledge that war crimes were being committed. Instead, it says the criminality was committed and covered up by patrol commanders. Okay, so what this is suggesting is basically that, you know, the high-level generals, high-level staff in the Australian military were not ordering this to happen, were not commanding this to happen, and did not know about this, but it was more local patrol commanders that knew of this going on and were kind of working to cover this type of stuff up. Could Bernie have won? I do believe Bernie could have won, yes. Small number of patrol commanders and their proteges. While it would have been much easier to report that it was poor command and leadership that was primarily to blame for the events disclosed in this report, that would be a gross distortion. Patrol commanders in the report found were viewed by troopers as demigods, which made it impossible to speak out about their actions. They are hero-worshipped and unstoppable, one anonymous soldier explained. The Brereton Report canvassed failures and oversight, the problems of warrior culture. The thing is, when we talk about them being treated like demigods, if your superior commits a crime, and you have this immense respect for your superior as like some sort of hero, who are you, some green soldier who just arrived and watched them murder somebody, to speak out against them? You just arrived. You don't have their same status. Who are you to speak out against them? It's that kind of culture of pressure that keeps you from really speaking out. And then again, who do you go speak out to? Your patrol commander? You'd have to go somewhere else. The Brereton Report canvasses failures and oversight, the problems of a warrior culture, and the use of small pool of SAS soldiers in repeated deployments over a prolonged period. The SAS were above question, particularly by outsiders, and a culture of secrecy within each patrol kept their actions from others. A separate review conducted by the Inspector General of the Australian Defence Force describes a kind of organizational blindness to the Special Forces' actions. The collective sacrifices of the Special Force in some way justified certain excesses, the review said, and more minor deviances from expected behavior, like drinking heavily on base, were tolerated. Complaints from locals and human rights groups were dismissed as Taliban propaganda or attempts to obtain compensation. It's clear that there were warning signs out there, but nothing happened. I think we've read basically everything. There's a little bit more to read here. We can finish this and then we can move to the documentary. The Prime Minister Scott Morrison called his counterpart in Afghanistan, President Ashraf Ghani, to apologize before the report releases on Thursday, which yesterday was the day, so it makes sense that we're getting it all now. Ghani's office said via Twitter that Morrison had expressed his deepest sorrow over the misconduct by some Australian troops in Afghanistan and assured the President of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan of the investigation and to ensure justice. The Foreign Affairs Minister separately wrote to Ghani to apologize and assured him that the Australian government was examining the inquiry findings and would make public statements subsequently. Former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, in his office for the last 2 years of the relevant period, issued a statement saying he was utterly disgusted and calling for the perpetrators to be brought to justice. Australia's Governor-General David Hurley, a former Defence Force chief during the period, offered condolences to the Afghan victims' families and described the allegations as unforgivable atrocities that were committed by a small number of individuals and deliberately concealed from the immediate chains of command. As Chief of Defence Force between July 2011 and July 2014, I'm deeply disappointed that the ADF inquiry and investigation process I commissioned in civilian casualties did not reveal the extent of the alleged offences. A large number... So he did his own report, which didn't show any of this. Got it. A large number of which were hidden as combat casualties and operational reports. My God. This is barbaric. Hey, Venom. Welp, a somber topic. Yeah, this is a pretty somber topic at the moment. I know this is not partnership celebration time, but I wanted to speak about it before it faded from the news. Brereton had investigating shocking allegations against the elite Australian troops since 2016, when he was tasked with examining dozens of incidents of Afghanistan between 2005 and 2016. His work revolved around reviewing 20,000 documents, 25,000 images, and his team interviewed 423 witnesses. We embarked on the inquiry with the hope that we would be able to report that the rumors of war crimes were without substance. None of us desired the outcome to which we have come. We are all diminished by it. The inquiry was triggered by work by military sociologist Samantha Comverpotts, who was tasked with examining Special Forces culture and began to hear disturbing alleged allegations of war crimes. One soldier told her, "Guys just had this bloodlust, psychos, absolute psychos, and we bred them." She heard one alleged man. When you have one soldier going up to psychologists saying, "Yeah, my squadron had a bloodlust, and your job there is to stabilize the country." I wonder why did I wonder if that's contributing to stabilization. One soldier told her, "Guys just had this bloodlust, psychos, absolute psychos, and we bred them." She heard one alleged incident in which two 14-year-old boys, children, were stopped by the SAS, who decided they might be Taliban sympathizers. Their throats were slit. So they just executed children. They just grabbed 14-year-old boys, put them on the floor, said, "You're Taliban," and cut off and slit their throats. That's ISIS shit. That's the type of stuff you see in ISIS beheading videos. She heard... Jesus Christ. The rest of the troop then had to clean up the mess by finding others to help dispose of the bodies. In the end, the bodies were bagged and thrown in a river. Wow, that's proper disposal technique, isn't it? That's great disposal technique. Oh, so what? So how? What? Oh, gets back to patrol commander. So what you do today? So you're walking down the street. We saw two kids. They look kind of like Taliban. So we got them on their knees, cut their throats, put their bodies in bags, and threw them in a river. What you do? Oh, I just got some coffee. You know, it's my day off. Combrose told The Guardian she expected the findings of the Brereton Report would force a fundamental rethink of Special Forces culture. They had no choice but to learn from this and to make sure that the reason it manifested in the first place never occurred again. Much of the evidence have already been canvassed publicly, though evident through extensive media reporting. The ABC revealed footage of one SAS member standing over an unarmed civilian asking his superior, "You want me to drop this C word?" before executing the man as he cowered in a wheat field. This is the video I saw. I am not going to show you the video. What you see is a man clearly unarmed in a field. This man runs up to him, shoves him to the ground. The guy gets on the floor. He follows instructions, which he can, from what he understands. Yells to someone else about executing him. The person's there, unarmed. Boom, executes him. Shoots him a few times in the chest. A U.S. Marine who worked with the Australian troops also alleged a civilian was shot dead because there was not enough room for him on a helicopter. In a separate alleged incident, an Afghan man was used as target practice after running from a SAS patrol, throwing a phone away and then putting his hands up. A signals intelligence officer accompanying the patrol, Brandon Chapman, told ABC he was then shot in cold blood. He put his hands up just like that, and then just stood there. As we got closer to him, the soldier just fired, hit him twice in the chest, and then shot him through the head as we walked past him. And then from then, he just moved on. Treating him like literal garbage. Like his life has zero meaning. I was only 5 to 10 meters behind him at the time. And at the time, I was just like, okay, the visual image to me was the guy had his hands up, and that it was almost like target practice for that soldier. Prior leaks of internal reviews had suggested that special forces were, prior to 2015, operating with the same sense of entitlement, arrogance, and elitism, governed only through a weak command culture.
A curd is a curd.
You sit behind a computer.
It's
and do it,
absolutely
it's ridiculous.
barbaric. Absolutely disgusting. And then people legitimately, I'll hear these fuckface neocons actually walk up to me and will tell me, like, when I talk about how Mike Pompeo is trying to fight the ICC, the International Criminal Court, on doing an investigation into war crimes in the United States military committing in Afghanistan, and he places sanctions on them for them just asking to do an investigation, and they tell me, well, it's because we just don't like the ICC and they shouldn't get their nose in it. And it isn't because in our 18 years of flawless conduct in Afghanistan, we're not going to find anything like this? Are you kidding me? The reason why Mike Pompeo is chomping down on the ICC, trying to stop them from doing an investigation, is because we know if we look into it, we're going to find a gross warrior culture that led to some stuff like this.